So, what do you think of when you see this image? It's a pretty classic image depicting the evolution of man. Now, without a lot of knowledge about phylogenies or the use of a phylogenetic tree, you might assume that this image is depicting that a man came from an ape, or maybe even a monkey. It kind of looks like two monkeys mated to produce this human-like monkey, and the human-like monkeys mated to produce this caveman, and cavemen mated to produce a human. But unfortunately, this is a gross misrepresentation of what this image is trying to portray. In reality, this image is portraying basically the evolutionary tree behind which our ancestors came. In no way does this image try to portray that apes mated to produce a ape-like human, or that caveman mated to produce a human. In fact, what it is showing is that we have common ancestors that are related to both our ancestral humans and the apes. Let's take a look at how this works. Here is a simple phylogenetic tree. You can see that it runs from past at the bottom to more recent in time at the top. At the bottom, you see the common ancestor for all of these descendants. This branch right here is where the speciation event occurred, and the blue line represents the ancestral lineage. Let's take a look at it another way. The blue line represents the unique history of the species C. The green line is the unique history of the species B. And the dashed line is the unique history of both B and C. Here's another way to look at the same thing. We can see the ancestor of C, the common ancestor of B and C, and the common ancestor of all the species listed. There's different ways to represent these lineages, and the biggest thing to remember is that all phylogenetic trees are hypotheses. But here you can see different traits that are being used to order these relations between the species. So we have the trait of hair, the trait of an amniotic egg, the trait of having 4 limbs, a bony skeleton. Take a look at this tree. Part of the reason why there are a lot of misconceptions behind phylogenetic trees is because of how they're portrayed. If you look at this tree, it kind of looks like the closest relationship with a human is a cat. It also tends to imply that a human is the best or most advanced species, because it looks like you start out with a fish and end with a human. Baum et al. In 2005 discovered that when the same exact information is portrayed in this phylogenetic tree as shown in B, people looked at it and thought that the frog was most closely related to a human. But the reality is, the information portrayed here is exactly the same. Just the way it's shown in the tree is a little bit different. But that's going to influence our perception. Here's a phylogenetic tree. Do you think this one is showing the same information? How about that one? Well, the reality is that they are. Phylogenetic trees come in many shapes and sizes. The most common one is kind of like a stick figure, but you can even have one shown in a circle, which usually will clear up any misconceptions because it's less likely that you're going to decide that there is a most advanced species when looking at the circular way of drawing a phylogenetic tree. Now let's join Dr. Schonely for a mini lecture on the use of phylogenetic trees and how they're beneficial in our society. He's going to touch on one of my favorite subjects, which is the avian or the bird flu. Here he is holding one of my chickens, who I assure you does not have the bird flu.
My name is Dr. Ken Schonely. I'm a professor here in biology at CSU Stanislaus, and I've been here since 2000. I teach the 3 E's: ecology, evolution, and entomology. And biology has always been an interest of mine ever since I was a little kid. I was sort of the bug eater on the block, and I have always been interested in puzzles and looking and trying to solve networks, and so that's what led me to an interest in phylogenetic trees. So we're going to explore today some applications of evolutionary trees so we can wrap our heads around this concept. Back in the 1990s, the race was on to determine the origin of HIV, the virus that causes AIDS in people. Phylogenetic analysis was among the methods used to show that all HIV-1 strains that infect man are actually closely related to just one SIV lineage in the chimpanzee in Africa. Phylogenetic trees constructed from mitochondrial DNA show that the chimpanzee is the primary reservoir for HIV-1 and has been the source of at least 3 independent introductions of SIV in the human population, as shown in this tree. Similarly, the outbreak of severe acute respiratory syndrome, or SARS, in southern China was tracked to SARS-like coronaviruses isolated from palm civecs and bats used as food and medicine. Of the 2 animal species, it was found that bats are a natural host for coronaviruses, most closely related to those responsible for the SARS outbreak, and that they display wider genetic variation than SARS strains isolated from humans or civecs. The human, civet, and bat strains intermingle within this tree on the bottom within the range of SARS coronaviruses, indicating that the virus responsible for the SARS outbreak was indeed a member of this coronavirus group. Now for something completely different. Back in 2005, Larson and colleagues used mitochondrial DNA sequences and geographical information taken from 686 wild and domestic pig specimens to discover the origin of modern European domesticated pigs. The study revealed that the origin of wild boars was Southeast Asia, as indicated by the red square there. The study also revealed that the origin of wild boars was not only in Southeast Asia, but after which time the populations dispersed across Eurasia, it led to multiple centers of pig domestication across Europe and Asia. Another application of tree thinking was a forensic investigation in Florida involving a dentist infected with HIV who was suspected of infecting some of his patients while they were undergoing treatment. Epidemiology and molecular studies were performed on the dentist with HIV, the virus that causes AIDS, several of his patients, and 35 HIV-infected persons from the local area. Because HIV evolves quickly, it was possible to compare HIV sequences and construct a phylogenetic tree. In the end, 3 separate analyses, including phylogenetic methods, showed that 5 patients had become infected with HIV while receiving care from this dentist. Lastly, I'd like to mention a few points about flu outbreaks. We had a particularly nasty one in 2009, and it spread worldwide within just a matter of a few weeks. First noticed in Mexico, and there were a lot of deaths in the US associated with this particular flu. So what happens is the virus can reassort itself and produce lots of different strains over a relatively short period of time. And these can lead to devastating consequences that the immune system really cannot recognize or do very much about. This additional variation brought upon by these reassortments produces some strains that are particularly nasty or virulent, including the Spanish flu, the Asian flu, the Hong Kong flu, and in 1997, a bird flu that was originally discovered in Hong Kong and led to naming that flu the H5N1 strain. Evolutionary biologists also help to solve the mystery of its appearance and also contribute to the production of new flu vaccines every year, including the one this year, which includes the H1N1 strain, which is another particularly nasty flu. So, the final message here is, it is the cold and flu season, so get the shot, not the flu, and let's all contribute then to herd immunity. Thank you.